Hey guys, this is National Master Kevin Yang back at it with another video. So this will be the start of my games over a 2-week period against 23 Dragons. So you'll notice that there was no video last week and you're wondering like, what happened, right? So, to be honest, I was quite busy with things, to be honest, and I just, I had all this material planned and I had all the recordings, but things just didn't get done. But hopefully you understand. I'm gonna get into the game if you don't mind. So e4 e6. What is this? The French defense. No, it is not because of the people in France. I mean, the French people are great people, but this is about the French defense, right? It's not like, okay, in a war, France fought a war and they won a war. No, it's not like that. It's just French defense, okay? Just don't overthink the name. Knight c3 and a6. Here I was like, let's go with something unusual, right? Something unusual is pretty cool sometimes. So here I said, I'm going to keep my option b5 open. I'm going to keep d5 open. I'm going to keep c5 open. I'm going to keep knight f6 open. Whatever. I'll think about it later, right? Here I play b5. And you'll see that the engine is already saying, white is already slightly better. Why is that? It's because white is controlling the center. That's the main reason. That's the only reason pretty much the computer bases it off of right now. a3, just saying, you're not allowing b4. Bring my bishop out, and I say, I'm going to attack your e4 square. Knight f3, knight f6, and now I'm just like, I'm going to take on e4. I like that. Bishop g5, perfectly fine, right? So the only thing I would say is also consider the move e5, also consider the move bishop d3, right? So first thing I would consider is e5. So what are the drawbacks to e5, right? So one thing that e5 does is e5 says, I'm going to restrict these two squares. But on the other hand, these two squares are leaked, I would say. But is it more important? Are these squares important enough, right? If knight d5 happens, then maybe knight takes d5, bishop takes d5, and bishop d3, and all of a sudden you realize that, okay, maybe the bishop wants to come to g5, and it's not so bad after all, right? So when making a decision, e5 is one of those moves, one of those moves where you sort of have to say, what is this pawn weakening, right? So obviously it's weakening these two squares, but it's also taking away these two squares from black's enemy camp. So, for example, black has to go d6 and take that in order to free him or herself a little bit. So that's just a little move to consider. There was also bishop d3, which was also reasonable. And yeah, so there was bishop g5. And I guess the one thing about this move is if I play h6 here, essentially this move commits to the fact that the bishop has to take on f6. And that's something I don't exactly like, because when you commit your bishop to take on f6, now black has the bishop pair, and although it may seem like, okay, these bishops are nothing compared to the value of these knights right now, that's true, but we have to keep in mind that in general terms, the bishop is going to be an okay piece. It's going to dominate the diagonals in most cases, right? But even though if they now are not dominating, they can dominate. So I would say this bishop move felt a little bit conceding to say, After h6, you're going to go bishop takes, right? Because after bishop h4, black plays g5, and black basically says, if you move, I'm going to take. And if you take, I'm going to take, and I'm going to bring my bishop out, and that pin is going to be of no use, right? So essentially that's what black's saying. So white would have to take on f6 in this instance to prevent losing this pawn. So in the game I played bishop e7. I said, nah, I don't think I was thinking about the mess move. I was just thinking about how to make fast moves on my board. And the first thing I thought of was, let me just prevent e5, right? Since this is going to be pinned. So I'm going to slide my bishop in between. After bishop d3, perfectly fine. Now I play d5. And here, my opponent, 23Dragons, plays bishop takes f6. And this is in fact a good move. Now, you might be like, well, didn't you tell me to not give up the bishop earlier? Well, half of it is true, except in this position, the thing is now, after e takes d5, right? So to an extent, you see that this bishop he's blocked off, right? So, for one, that only means good for white. Like, white has the potential to say castles, rook to e1, and knight to e5, right? Just using this pawn, and these pawns are blockading this bishop from doing anything. So earlier we said, bishop takes f6, queen takes f6, right? But here this bishop has this line of sight. But now, this line of sight is gone. So essentially, it's more beneficial for white now. Knight e5. And I feel like the only problem about knight e5 is it's a little bit too early. Because now you realize that after I play a move like c5, right? So what does c5 do, first of all? Number one, it says if you take here, I'm going to take your knight, right? It's because this guy is the only defender of the knight, and that just goes to show how vulnerable this pawn is, right? If there was a pawn on c3 protecting d4, then I would have said this is not a bad move. But here our 23Dragons went Hail Mary. So after knight takes, a takes, bishop takes, it was just a matter of trying to get the king to not castle. So I moved the king, castles, and I took on e5. So in this position, there are many ways to approach it. I could play the move queen c7, threaten the knight. So after queen c7, rook e1, I could play knight c6 and get my piece out. Because after f4, I would play something like knight takes d4, or after, let's say, bishop takes c6, bishop takes c6, and all of a sudden, we still have the pressure on e5, but after something like c3, I could play c4, maybe bishop a4, maybe achieve my goal of bringing my king to a better square. Right? So there are many different ways of approaching it, but these bishops are safe, and that's one thing. So I would kind of say that this sacrifice was probably unnecessary due to the fact that there was no follow-up, right? The only intention was to bring the king to not castle, and trust me, that's a good intention, but at the price of what, right? So I would say the only problem with this sacrifice is that the price was too much, and that is a problem when it comes to, let's say, when you're deciding. It's all about figuring out the reward and how much you're going to get out of that reward. Like, are you going to get checkmate from sacrificing 2 rooks? If you do, then you go for it. But if you don't get that reward and you end up, say, losing a knight and a bishop and a rook, well, then that's not going to be great, right? Because in the long term, your opponent's going to gonna outweigh your company, let's say. If you put too much, like you go too heavy, you go too deep into the water, you can't back up, right? So essentially chess is a one-way street. Think about it that way. It's a one-way street. You go one way, you realize that you've screwed up, but you can't do anything about it because it is permanent damage. So after castles, bishop takes, pawn takes, knight out, rook e1, knight d4. So I'm saying I'm asserting my dominance on this bishop. I might be playing queen g5. I might be defending this e6 square with knight e6. So after e6, I just get my knight back to e6. Rook takes e6 for the Hail Mary. Pawn takes, queen f3, queen f6, and at this point, white has little to no attack. So queen e3. Now at this point, I could have played queen takes b2, threatening both pieces, but I decided not to. So after d4, queen g3, maybe look into queen d6 or queen c7. I said rook d8, rook d1, and you'll see that I was very protected in this position, right? I did the most I can to keep my king safe. So after queen f6, queen c7, and what do you know? Checkmate is incoming. So what did we learn from this game? Well, we learned that maybe bishop g5 wasn't the best move, and to me the reason why is because you're sort of conceding to the fact that you're going to lose this bishop. You're going to want to trade this bishop for a knight, and although that's completely acceptable, right? There's nothing wrong with it. It's just that the bishop is worth a little bit more than the knight. And this is an open position, so I tell you that in open positions, which piece do we want? We want the bishop. And so giving away the bishop in that position, it wouldn't have been so graceful. So now giving up the bishop, it gives white, it sort of breaks this line of sight and it says, castles, rook e8, black has play, but obviously this bishop, in order to get back into the game, it needs to reroute. But after 95, it was a little bit rushed. I have to say that the intention was right, right? To place a knight on e5, to play f4, the intention was right. It's just the execution was a little bit too, what do you call it? I don't know, maybe too subtle, too, I don't know, too impatient, right? So 95 was the right idea, but castle first, rook e1, and then bring the knight t5. That would have been the perfect timing. But here I had c5, and it just starts to wonder, right? What is the knight doing here anymore? And so after this Hail Mary, which unfortunately did not lead anywhere, it was worth a try, but ultimately black won the duel. So hopefully you enjoyed this and you thought about your mistakes, you laughed it off, and you continued playing because that's what it's all about. It's not about whining over it, right? It's just a game. Life is a game, right? Sometimes you'll laugh over the things you don't do well in life, and sometimes you'll take it personally. But chess is something you should have fun, discover your curiosity, and build character, right? So I know this chess player at my local chess club, and he's always like, that's okay. It's okay if you lose because every loss builds character. And I'll repeat that message to you. It builds character. So, thank you.